The title of our lesson, Don't Be a Pharisee, and you can go ahead and turn to Matthew 23 if you'd like. We will read through there. So when Jesus came on the scene, no one was teaching the way that he taught. Matthew chapter 7, verse 29 says that he taught as one who had authority. And as a reader, whenever you're going through the Bible, you wonder, why were Jesus' words more powerful or more effective than the teaching of the Pharisees and those others that were teaching at the time? Maybe it was his compassion. He was compassionate, but yet he could be pointed at times. We'll see that in these verses. But whenever you look at who you're stacking him up against, the Pharisees considered themselves experts in the law. They added rules to God's law. They were inconsistent, and they obsessed over technical matters. Their strict legal code obscured the fundamental principles that God intended to guide his people. So that's what we're stacking him up against at the time. The stricter that these men made the code, the more difficult it was for people to follow, which was perfect for them because they were a select group and they liked it that way. Unlike human traditions, God's principles are perfect, and when his will is applied consistently, when they're written on our hearts, it's very effective. Jesus, on the other hand, taught people life-changing principles of God's kingdom, always relevant to the lives of ordinary people. That's nice, because I'm ordinary. You are too. And Matthew 23 is a scathing rebuke to the scribes and the Pharisees, in which Jesus reveals their inconsistency and their hypocrisy. And it also includes some great word pictures that are hard to get out of your head. And that's kind of why I like this chapter. And I hope that it'll be useful to us, because, sometimes whenever we read through verses like this, we think, well, that's not us. And from my past experience, when I was a young man looking for a church, when I was looking for God in any way I could find him, sometimes the answers I got from church members weren't good. They put themselves on a high horse, and that's not our job. Our job is to preach the gospel. It's not to justify ourselves. And I think these verses really help us to bring down to the level we need to be on. So Matthew 23, we'll read verses 1 through 12 to start. It says, Then Jesus spoke to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, whatever they tell you to observe, that observe and do, but do not do according to their works. For they say and do not do. For they bind heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. But all their works they do to be seen by men. They make their phylacteries broad and enlarge the borders of their garments. They love the best places at the feast, the best seats in the synagogues, greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But you do not be called Rabbi, for one is your teacher, the Christ, and you are all brethren. Do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your Father, who is in heaven. And do not be called teachers, for one is your teacher, the Christ. But he who is greatest among you shall be your servant, and whoever exalts himself will be humbled. Whenever I read through these verses, I think you can see what I see. In the first 10 verses, we see the way that we shouldn't be. And in verses 11 and 12, we see what Christ is, and that's what we should be. And I want you to imagine with me, I want you to put this scene in your mind. We have a group to the side that looks like these arrogant folks here, very self-minded. This is the Passover, and most of the crowd is probably from Galilee. They're out-of-towners. And Jesus is talking to this group of visitors, and the Pharisees in this picture within earshot, so they can hear what he's saying. And Jesus is warning visitors of the true character of the Pharisees. And this passage seems to be the most severe and extended rebuke that Jesus ever pronounces. And it's called 7 woes, but I counted more woes. And so we're going to look at those this evening. So who are the scribes? I'm trying to attack this like you're young and you don't know. Who are the scribes? They're members of the Pharisaic party whose job is to read and interpret the law. The Pharisee then applies the interpretation to their life, and Jesus does not condemn them for their strict interpretation of the law. He does condemn their hypocrisy. So it's their attitude, right? It's their attitude in this. Jesus is saying, listen to the law and do the law of God, but do not act like these men. Don't have the attitude of these men. They do things to be seen and rewarded by men. Don't try to be prominent over other people, but take on the heart of a servant and do as I do. These leaders are not interested in shepherding the people of God as they should. They simply want to elevate themselves. Hopefully in our interactions with others, we're not like these men. Hopefully we're not arrogant or high-minded of ourselves. We have to remember our place. We are messengers of the gospel. We are workers. We're servants in the Lord's kingdom. And it's ironic to me that the real master teacher is standing in their midst, yet they ignorantly refuse to acknowledge him. With their attitude, they're not seeking to learn, they just seek to justify themselves. And as we continue to read, I want you to pay special attention to the woes. In the Septuagint, the word woe is used to express sorrow, despair, pain, or fear of losing one's life. Here, Jesus uses woe to express his divine displeasure of the scribes and the Pharisees that are abusing their religious power. And the word hypocrite used in these verses carries the idea of an actor on a stage pretending to be someone that they're not. And I think that's something that we see in movies and television shows. So we understand what an actor is. So let's continue in verse 13. It says, "But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven against men, for you neither go in yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers. Therefore you will receive greater condemnation. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you travel land and sea to win one proselyte, and when he is won, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourselves. Woe to you, blind guides, who say, whoever swears by the temple, it is nothing, but whoever swears by the gold of the temple, he is obliged to perform it. Fools and blind, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold? And whoever swears by the altar, it is nothing, but whoever swears by the gift that is on the altar, he is obliged to perform it. Fools and blind, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Therefore, he who swears by the altar swears by it, and by all things on it. But he who swears by the temple swears by it, and by him who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by the throne of God, and by him who sits on it." So let's look at the woes that he just talked about here. He says, first of all, they shut up the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus is preaching, and the common people are accepting the message that he is preaching, this invitation. But this religious group is discouraging people from following Jesus, and it's a tragedy to lose your own soul, but it's even worse to cause others to lose their souls because of your discouragement. And I hope we never find ourselves in that category, because a lot of times when we read this, we think, well, we would never do that. Well, sometimes whenever somebody comes in the doors that's different than us, whether it's skin color, maybe they stink. I don't know what it is, but sometimes we discourage them from being here because they're different than we are. I hope that's never the case. Secondly, he says they devour widows' houses. These men took advantage of these ladies and extorted money from them or used their property for their own use. And this to me that's one of those things that just gets under my skin. You want to pick on people that can't take care of themselves? Well, Jesus didn't like it either. Christians are commanded to take care of our widows, aren't we? We're taught that in the New Testament. We take care of our widows, and we shouldn't devour anyone. He also says they pray with long, meaningless prayers. And these are not humble prayers. They were prayers to be seen and heard by others. It was a false show. Now, I'm not saying long prayers are wrong, okay? I just want to, because sometimes we hear what we want to hear. I'm not saying long prayers are wrong. But if your attitude while praying is to toot your own horn or to look smarter or more religious, it's not going to get above the ceiling. And that's something for us to remember. They also created more people like them. That's one of the woes there. They would spare no expense to convert more people to their logic. And the convert was worse off in the end. They were following man's ideas and logic, not God's. And to convert someone to Christ, they're better off, aren't they? But if we're going by man's logic as they were, they're going to be worse off. Oaths and vows. Oaths and vows should not be taken lightly and should not be broken. I mean, we look at obeying the gospel. We look at marriage. But these men would swear by lesser things than God in order to get out of their oaths. It was a mockery is what it was. They mocked the very principle of truth. And how do I not do this? Don't say you're going to do something when you have no intention of doing it. Let's just keep it easy like that. You don't have to make a promise. Somebody asks you to do something, I'm going to do that. Okay, then do that. You don't have to make promises. I'm going to do that. Keep it short, simple, to the point. Matthew 23, we'll move on. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. Blind guides who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. Look, I got a picture. Isn't that cool? Hope that just hung in your head. Just hope tomorrow you see a guy swallowing a camel. That's what I'm going for. You know, according to the Levitical law, gnats are unclean. So I can appreciate you straining that out of your drink, right? I don't want to drink gnats. I get them in my house every now and then. Every time we buy bananas, the gnats show up. Or I get out the sourdough, the gnats show up. So we don't like gnats. But they would go to the extreme of straining the gnats out of their drink. Leviticus 11 and 20, you must not eat winged insects that walk along the ground. They are detestable to you. But in Leviticus 11 and 4, we see that a camel is unclean. You may not, however, eat the following animals that have split hooves or that chew the cud, but not both. The camel chews the cud, but does not have split hooves, so it is ceremonially unclean for you. And it's really funny. It's a funny picture to me. It's an interesting thought. The Pharisees strained out gnats, yet they swallowed camels. So you don't want the little unclean thing, but you're okay with the big one, as you can see from the picture. What an inconsistency. They ignored the larger principles of God. So it's swallowing camels, but carefully observed their favorite rules and traditions. So that's straining out gnats out of their drinks. Had they focused on the larger principles, the smaller decisions would naturally have followed. They would have kept the weightier matters without leaving the lesser undone. And we can see even in here that they went so far to even pay tithe from the mint, the smallest herbs in their garden, but yet when it comes to the weighty matters like ripping off widows, we do that. But they're given of their smallest herbs, just really odd. The Bible includes the laws to be obeyed and principles to guide our daily walk of life. And God does not prescribe every activity or choice that we have to make. But if we absorb the principles taught throughout His Word, we learn to discern good and evil. And that word discern, I don't use that word a lot, so I'm going to define it for you. Discern is the ability to distinguish between truth and error, the ability to distinguish between right and wrong, the ability to distinguish between good and evil, and that's guided by God's Word. We see that a lot, the word discern throughout the Bible, especially whenever we're in the book of Proverbs, as we studied through it during our meeting. We see the word discern, and that gets easier to do as you get older, right? It's easier to discern because you know more. But whenever you're young, it might be tough to discern things. But you have parents and you have good men and women here that can help you whenever you have to make choices. But this kind of commitment to godly priorities gives life to our Christian walk and our relationship with our Father and to our character. And living by His weightier principles while observing the lesser matters is a life full of obedience and His will. Let's pick up in verse 25. This is the last set of verses we're going to read. It says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cleanse the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of extortion and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first cleanse the inside of the cup and dish, that the outside of them may be clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so, you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets and adorn the monuments of the righteous, and say, if we had lived in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets." So what are their woes? They clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but are full of greed and self-indulgence. You know, that's a nasty thing, isn't it? A dirty cup. Especially when you think everything's fine and then you're drinking your coffee and you get to the bottom and go, what in the world is that? That's happened to me a few times. It kind of makes you sick a little bit. Makes that coffee that tastes so good just not any good anymore. So they appear outwardly clean, but they're inwardly filled with greed and self-indulgence. He also says that they're like whitewashed tombs. They appear outwardly righteous, but inwardly they're full of death and corruption. And whenever we look at the tombs in the picture, we say, well, that's pretty. It's nice until you open it up, right? Then there's bones in there. They profess that they would not have been partakers in the blood of the prophets, but they are children of those who killed the prophets. They claim not to be like those who killed the prophets, but they are in fact their descendants, and they carry on the same spirit, because within days of this scathing rebuke, these men do exactly the same thing that their fathers did. And Jesus is brutally beaten and crucified. We wouldn't do that, but we did it. These men are exactly like their fathers. So outwardly they are church goers, but inwardly they are polluted. They are spiritually bankrupt. Spiritually bankrupt. And after they end up killing Jesus, they then turn their attention to the apostles and the followers in the coming years, and they take the lives of them as well. So the apple does not fall far from the tree. So in conclusion this afternoon, this chapter highlights the outward show of religious piety of these individuals while neglecting true justice, mercy, and faithfulness. And hopefully these things are glaringly obvious to you and I as we read. So all that we need to do with that is don't be a hypocrite, right? It's kind of a joke at our house. If there's something that you're really struggling with, like I'm having trouble breathing, well, just breathe. It's that easy, right? But it is. Just don't be a hypocrite. We don't need to be hypocrites. Don't be a dirty whitewashed tomb or a dirty cup that looks clean on the outside, but inwardly you're just full of dead men's bones. That's not pictures that we are used to. Do not just appear to be good, but really be the Christian that you and I profess to be in word and in deed. I think that's what we can get from the chapter. Because a lot of times whenever we read through it, we think, man, those guys were terrible. But I think whenever we actually reflect on our life, we might be able to see something that we can do better at. Which whenever I read it, I see something I can be better at. So hopefully something that we've said this evening is useful to you. Hopefully those word pictures are caught in your head and you can't get rid of them. And maybe there's something that you need to work on, and you can do that. We've got people here that love you and be glad to assist you with that. We never close the service without offering the invitation. If you've never obeyed the gospel, we can assist you with that this evening. Or maybe you're a child of God and you need the prayers of the church or assistance with something you're dealing with. But please come as we stand and as we sing.
We really appreciate you watching this channel and supporting the Chapel Grove Church of Christ YouTube page. I want to ask you a quick question. Do you want to help in a big way spread the gospel and help this channel succeed? All you have to do is click the subscribe button, click a thumbs up, and then share it with a friend. Share it on social media, share it on text. However you do it, just share it for other people to see. It helps the channel grow, it helps the videos get out there, and it helps spread the gospel in a really easy way that has a big effect. Thank you for supporting us, and come back for more videos.